Welcome back. Special edition of the Missed on Point podcast. When Ben Moore acts, we show up. I've got Ben Moore on the line. Ben, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Eric. Hope you're doing well as well, man.
I'm doing great. I'm doing great, especially after a big victory over Rhode Island, 41-7. GSU looked great in that game. Finally started to see what the running game could do a little bit. What were your thoughts just before we get into some of the other news about this week's last game?
I think it was critical to go on the road, especially in the CAA. You haven't had a road victory since Campbell 2 years ago, and went to go completely winless. And obviously the team has been very disappointing. Not really kind of finding an identity on offense or defense. And I think you nailed it. This team really realized, hey, look, we need to run the ball, set up short passes. I was really impressed with the game plan by John Bond. Get the ball out of Ben McClain's hands very, very quickly. Get it out to Kelton Hill. Get it out to Albert Wilson quickly, and let these guys work in space. Even if it picks up 5-6 yards, you still give yourself a chance. Where if I'm giving the ball to Donald Russell, 15, 20 times, I mean, as he showed on Saturday, he's just nearly impossible to take down with one defender, especially guys at this level. This guy was an SEC running back for 2 seasons and averaged over 5 yards a carry. So he was taking on all comers at Kentucky. Certainly will do the same thing up in Rhode Island, and I expect him to finish the season really, really strong.
Now, Russell obviously in the short span is probably going to go down maybe the best player in GSU history. That could be debatable with some other things, but I thought it was important to get a win. But the victory kind of happened a little bit after the news that you broke on PantherTalk.com, which is the upcoming schedule or future opponents for Georgia State, and it is a who's who of college football. When you texted me and you said, have you seen the schedule? The first thing I thought of was, were you talking about basketball? And I was like, basketball? No, I already know we're playing Duke. I'm ready for that game. So I instantly looked up on my phone, and I saw a picture of Geno Smith, and part of me went, oh, dear God. And then it got better, or worse, depending on where you stand. So we're playing West Virginia, Alabama, Oregon. All those games are on the road, correct?
That's correct.
And a home and home with Air Force.
That's correct as well.
Talk about what this means for the program as a whole, just on the global scale, what this means.
I think it's validation. I know some fans may not like to hear that. To go to a big name opponent, certainly before last weekend's craziness and West Virginia just absolutely got taken to the woodshed by a really good Texas Tech team in Lubbock on Saturday. But before that, I mean, this was two top 10 programs, potentially two top 5 programs, and Alabama certainly number one, and won multiple national championships in the last 3 years. They are a name opponent. There were some fans walking out of Tuscaloosa in 2010 that said, well, Bill Curry coached here. Alabama kind of did them a favor. Well, I hate to break it to those folks. We're going back to Tuscaloosa, and Bill Curry's not going to be our head coach. So this was no favor. This was no attaboy or here's $500,000 to come, and we'll get healthy. We are an FBS program next year. That certainly helps. It ratchets the amount of money that we can demand for a road game through the roof. I mean, just those 2 games, Alabama, West Virginia, net $1.25 million. So critical to know that fact as well. The going rate is so much higher for FBS, and I think it's great to put out name opponents. Oregon is a traditional power as well. Just know that's out there from 2015, and you can say, hey, incoming freshmen, hey, we are going. Who do you guys play? Well, we're going to West Virginia your freshman year. We're going to Alabama your freshman year. Hey, by the time you're juniors or redshirt or sophomores, we'll be going out to Alson Stadium to go play the Ducks and go out there to Oregon and experience that. It's an incredible challenge, but I think at the same point it gives some legitimacy to this program. And that's a big thing that a lot of folks have wondered about is how are they going to fit in the mix here regionally? How are they going to fit in the mix within Georgia? We've so long, Georgia State's been the stepchild in the state, and that goes away when you play the big time programs because let's be honest, the teams in the Colonial, they're very good at what they are. In this part of the country, nobody knows the difference between a New Hampshire or a William and Mary or a Rhode Island. They don't know any of those teams. With respect to the rest of the schedule as well. Most people know Villanova for basketball and certainly basketball success with Jay Wright.
Right.
And they do football. And that's probably the biggest. I got asked that question today. Is this the biggest this weekend coming up for homecoming? Is that the biggest name opponent you guys have had in the Dome? And I said, probably, because people know Villanova. They don't know Villanova football necessarily, but they know Villanova. So
right.
It's so critical and so huge. And I applaud the athletic director, Cheryl Levick, and her administration as well for putting your neck out there to do it. To know, hey, these are going to be extremely challenging. And another thing, too, we have a new head coach coming in. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's a huge piece to them as well, because if you have a schedule laid out there and say, look, this is going to be a challenge for you, but this is also a rallying point to say, you know what, it is us against the world, and I think that's very important.
I think I'm going to disagree with you on one kind of point. I think obviously it adds legitimacy, the fact that we get to go out and play these big schools, but there's always kind of, for lack of a better word, these sacrificial lamb schools that go out, Savannah State, for example, to call out a school, who go to school that they are not in the realm of competing against. I personally think that if we are not competitive, and let me define competitive. Competitive means we do not get slaughtered 60-3, or I can't remember one of the Savannah State scores, which was like maybe they almost gave up 80 points.
It was 84 to nothing.
Yeah, 84. Yeah, 84 to nothing. It would be great if the team goes out. Obviously, a win might be a bit of a pipe dream, but if they can be within, say, 28 points, or they could actually hold a lead to say, hey, we held a lead or we competed on the field. I think we have obviously a better chance of that against Oregon. We don't play them until 2015. Alabama's Alabama. I don't know if you're going to put together a team within the span of that time frame to be that competitive. But I do remember the first time we played them. We had a couple of big plays. We had a kickoff return for a touchdown. When we get on the field with Alabama and West Virginia next year, what will success in your eyes have to look like?
I think just the next steps. It's being competitive again. I think you saw that with Tennessee. How many Tennessee fans, certainly there live in Knoxville, were booing at the end of the first quarter when the Panther defense actually forced 2 consecutive punts out of the vaunted ball offense and Tyler Bray. Now, reality set back in the rest of the second quarter, and certainly third and fourth. I mean, their offensive weapons are very, very strong on the Tennessee offense. But it was 7-3 at the end of the first quarter.
Right.
And I think if you can sustain drives like that, where you can build confidence, and this is what's going to be so interesting, and why certainly I am positive about next season. The next head coach will have 24 scholarship seniors on the roster, guys that have played a ton, and then with that fact, being able to bring in their recruits, and this is why I think it's so important. And I know we'll get to it in a little bit, but just specifically with guys, they have to make this hire so quickly in order to have a chance of recruiting. And I think with this recruiting team, with this schedule, saying, look, we can go to West Virginia and compete with these guys. Sometimes guys don't have their A game. Certainly in our conference in the Sun Belt, even last Troy fans, they went and played number 19 ranked Missouri back in the early 2000s, and they upset them, and that launched their program. You had a potential Heisman Trophy winner there on Missouri's roster, and it just launched Troy football to the level where it has been sustained success for basically the last decade. And I think that's all it takes is one of those games, and is it going to be against Missouri on a level like that, or West Virginia or Alabama for us? I don't think so. I think it's too lofty, but I think you want to see progression.
Okay.
The game kind of got out of hand in the second and third quarter against Tennessee.
Right.
But you can see that, hey, look, these guys were not backing down. I think it's that continued step. The tough part about, especially with West Virginia and that offense under David Culberson, is they just run so many plays. So depth is going to be an issue defensively. Going to see against Alabama, you mentioned there were several plays the first year of the program, only the 11th game ever for some of these guys. And this was the biggest stage for them. First play, roll out, out to Emmanuel Boye, yards. I've never seen 102,000 people dead silent, but that was happening that day.
Right.
And it was a fleeting moment.
Mm-hmm.
But these are the kind of moments where, hey, we can't make one play. Why can't we make one drive and two drives and string those together? I mean, that's the biggest thing. You want to see continue to get competitive and see those scores get a lot closer.
Yeah, Alabama pretty much is going to have a squad. We understand that. I believe West Virginia, Geno Smith, probably will not be playing. I believe actually he's a senior, and he's done.
He is a senior,
right. Correct. For us, the negative is that Russell is a senior. He will be done. Is that correct?
He was a senior, so he'll be moving on.
Okay.
Hopefully the professional ranks, but yeah, we'll definitely have to find a running back that can try to fill his shoes.
I mean, not to sidetrack, but I mean, Russell looks like he can play in the NFL. I mean, at this level, he looks like he's on a different speed. He is clearly the top back in the CAA. He doesn't. I saw the game last week that was on TV. I forget the name of the team right now. He moved.
New Hampshire, yep.
Yes, New Hampshire. He moved at a different speed, and when he got the ball, he made plays. It's going to be really sad to see Russell go, but that's an opportunity for someone to step up. As you'll hear a lot of coaches say, next man up, and that's what we'll be looking for. I like the fact that we're playing these games. Air Force doesn't come in until 2014. That's an opportunity to maybe get kind of a landmark victory, so to speak. Air Force isn't exactly the most athletic, fast team in the country. They're definitely not on the level of the other three teams we've talked about. But I agree with you. I think the progression, the next step, maybe going into half only down by a touchdown or a score, and the crowd being silent when we go to some of these home games, I think is important. And it's great for recruiting. It's great for the coaching search. But let's go there now. Let's talk about the head coaching search. You did a wonderful job listing a group of candidates that have been mentioned or talked about, I'm assuming, on the website, and probably through your own inside sources, of who would be being looked at for the head coaching job for GSU. One of the hot names on the site is Mike Bobo. I have my own thoughts on him. When you look at that list, what sticks out to you about that list?
Just the variety. There's a ton of different names, and certainly everybody has their own view. Some of the programs that they also follow, and we get that a lot, certainly being a very infant program, only in their third season. You're going to have programs that you were either a fan of or you followed or just like to watch on Saturdays prior to Georgia State football. So you have kind of those biases. We have folks who grew up, Georgia fans, and I think that's probably why you see Mike Bobo's name constantly. And I think it's very interesting to kind of see that. And just kind of one tip too, using an executive search firm too. I think it's helpful for folks to understand how the process goes. I know been asked kind of say, hey, why do folks use that? The biggest thing is confidentiality. They don't, back in the old days, you basically had to go through the school. You had to call up the coach, call up the athletic director, potentially give them permission to speak to an assistant coach or a head coach or however you wanted to handle it. And the more people you talk to, the more information kind of gets out, and then things get to the beat writers and all that kind of stuff. And the information age we live in, it's immediately on Twitter, and hey, they're planes across the country and things that way. So that's the number one thing that keeps it confidential. Now, number two, you're able to find a list, and in most cases, from what I understand, is they actually go to the representatives or the agents of these potential coaching candidates, and then it keeps it even more quiet. You can kind of find out, hey, this is the term, this is what we're looking at, is this the right fit? Was this something you're interested in? And honestly, get the conversation started, and probably for some of these assistant coaches, get the wives involved. Hey, do you want to move to Atlanta?
Right.
Or do you want to move here, XYZ city? So it helps have that conversation and get it started, and I'm very interested to see what candidates certainly interview and what the timeline is that the hire's made.
I think we need a guy who is a big personality, clearly is great at recruiting, understands kind of the demands of what it needs to be a head coach. I do want to say, this is just my opinion, I don't get Mike Bobo. I know he's gotten a lot of heat at UGA, but I don't see that. I think what we will do is something very similar to what we did with the head coaching search for basketball when we brought in. Oh God, his name's going to escape me now.
Ron Hunter, don't
Yeah,
worry.
thank you, Coach Hunter, where we brought in a guy from IUPUI, a guy who some people kind of knew for one reason, but didn't really probably know how good of a coach he was. Came in first year, very successful. I think we go that same route based on kind of the dynamics of what I've been hearing about how much we're going to be looking at paying a coach. But I don't think it's I don't think it's Bobo. I am interested in the Southern Illinois coach. Some of these maybe any of the guys who are maybe offensive coordinators in the SEC will be great because they understand recruiting in the South and also probably bring a little bit of cachet to the job as well. I I don't know. Like some of these former head coaches, I don't see Fulmer or Tommy Bowden or Terry Bowden. All those guys probably could have gotten another big job somewhere at some point. My thinking. Um, you know, what do you think? Like, do you think I'm on the right train of thought here, or do you think that it's wide open and it's too early to tell?
It may be too early to tell, but I think the big thing, and you hit an important factor. It does come down to salary. And I'll just back up one second. You mentioned Coach Ron Hunter, certainly in this basketball.
Yes.
Just kind of give you an idea. Certainly in the IUPUI, Georgia State was able to more than double his salary. So it was, we have a higher budget than IUPUI does. They don't have a football program. They don't support that, so you don't have additional funding coming in there. We made almost an offer that was too good to refuse, and he said that enough publicly that said, look, there was something about Georgia State that drew him to this position. It's a little bit different, certainly in football, moving to the FBS ranks. There's a couple great websites out there that talk about where our projected salary range
Right.
is and where it sits right now, and it's in the bottom 100, 115 or so out of 125 schools. So it is on the lower end, but I think it's also a scenario where you have to start somewhere. Coach Curry and his staff was one of the highest paid, if not the highest paid, up until last year of the FCS ranks. Mm-hmm. So the question isn't, hey, will Georgia State pay? It's let's see what this product is and not give away the farm. And I think that's where it eliminates some of those former coaches. Is they're
Right.
used to making a lot bigger salary, and it's very difficult for them to back down and say, hey, I'm going to take less than $750,000 to come take this job, just because that's what they're used to. Fulmer is a great example, and I agree. If he wants to get back in, I think he has a much bigger program that will probably be calling him. But I agree with you on Bobo as well. I don't foresee him leaving anytime soon. I would anticipate he may even get a raise, just specifically how the rest of the season finishes out. I don't think he's certainly the coordinator. We talked about it off here just a second. I don't think he's a coordinator that's under fire. I think Grantham is certainly after the big raise and making nearly $1 million. I think this job will also have a lot of incentives to it as well, which will help and very much, hey, if you win and there's bold triggers. But just analyzing Coach Hunter's contract, he had things in there about academics. He had things that he had certain wins and NCAA tournaments and things that way. I think you can translate the same way on the football side. Hey, if you have a winning season, if you make a bowl, if you are competing for a conference championship potentially, who knows where the Sun Belt's going to be? Maybe you add a couple teams and potentially have a championship game. So hey, to win your division. So there's a couple layers to this that still may not be out there that are not just salaries, total compensation potentially. But I think it's still very attractive. But I agree, you may be on the right path. I think a bigger time SEC, ACC, Big Ten maybe, especially for BCS conference coordinator. If you look at the Sun Belt, and I kind of focus on that specifically,
right.
Their latest hires the last 2 years have been that exact thing. They've come from bigger programs, whether it was Carl Pelini, who was both Pelini's, of course, of the LSU fame, and now at Nebraska, his brother, he was a coordinator, and looking at offensive and defensive coordinators, you pick out these guys who've been around successful programs, big time programs. They come down here and have a strategy and a game plan that can really get rocking and rolling. But another thing to consider, you got 9 assistants as well, and that's so critical. No matter how dynamic the head coach is, that they're not going to be able to get in front of every single person, every single recruit. They are certainly the face, but you need a very good and very strong staff, and that's so vital to have an entertaining staff, folks that can get out and recruit, and really get out in these Atlanta high schools. That's why I think it's so important to have people that have been local, regional,
yes.
that recruit the Atlanta area, because we do have to establish a footprint in this city, around this metro area, and let's own it.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's why I think I was focusing more so on kind of coordinators in the SEC or maybe even the ACC. I know you've got Lawrence Dawsey. Sorry if I mispronounced that. From Florida State. He clearly has probably been in the area. If you're coming from a big time program around big time success, I think that adds some credibility to it as well. And I think next year or going into next year, that's what it's all about: adding credibility. Are you bringing in the recruits? Are you bringing in the head coach? Are you bringing in the staff that is going to say, hey, we're not just some little cute little team that, started up a football team. We're a team that in the future people want to be afraid of, be reckoned with. And I think this coaching hire will set the tone for that. Coach Curry's done a great job of setting it up. Now it's time for us to bring in someone big time. Last point on the coaching search. Do you what type of, if it's a coordinator, let's just kind of play this out real quick. Would you prefer defense or offense?
I personally would go offensive, just looking at the return of talent and where the pieces you can build in. I think an offensive guy, especially how the city is made up, to have an attractive program, you need flashy weapons. If you look up and down this roster, we mentioned it already, Donald Russell is going to be the only senior that you lose off this entire starting 11 offensively. So you have everyone coming back, your entire offensive line coming back. Hopefully Albert Wilson, one step forward, which he's been just absolutely dynamic in the times where he catches the football. Hopefully a healthy Jordan Giles, a healthier Danny Williams. I know he struggled with an ankle injury pretty much all year, but has still put up really good numbers. I want a guy who basically can utilize the talent in front of him and say, look, we've got a lot of pieces coming back offensively. We can build this and put this in the success, in a successful strategy, game plan, be able to build it out and say, look, I can win with these guys that I have. They've been through the wars. They've played a ton of games. They have a ton of starts under the belt. Be able to do that. And then go hire, a young, hungry defensive coordinator that wants to make a name for himself. I think that's the biggest part. Where certainly Coach Curry, stayed on the staff and hired Anthony Midget, and he's taken a lot of heat certainly within the fan base. And there's a litany of issues that have led to that, but it's just one of those things where you want to take risks like that sometimes. You want to get guys who are young and hungry, Midget's an excellent recruiter, and you want to give him an opportunity to make that step and say, look, he was a cornerbacks coach and coached defensive backs. You want him to take that next step and see if he can handle being a defensive coordinator.
I just to play devil's advocate, although I do agree. I think an offensive coordinator for the type of talent that you bring in. The only reason I would say a defensive coordinator is Atlanta and Georgia, for that matter. Sorry, Georgia Tech is pretty much an ACC town. It's an ACC or SEC, SEC state. A lot of the teams in the SEC play, outstanding defense, with the exception apparently of Georgia. I would like to see a defensive coordinator come in. If we can either way, I think the person that we hire, if we can establish an identity on both sides of the football, I think we'll go a long way in progressing as a team. I think the fact that Russell probably hadn't gotten the football as much, I think it's hurt us in some games. And obviously, I'm not sure what's happened to the defense at all. I expected them to be much better, but credibility is the key here.
No question. I agree with that. Whoever it is, and whoever it is, and I agree with you defensively. It's got to be critical, and that's been an issue, and it continues to get worse as the program has gone on and turned over, sort of switching styles this year. Whoever it is, it's got to be instant credibility for sure.
I will say this. I know, Ben, you said you won't make your top 5 picks until like the end of the season. I'm saying this now. I don't want a Townsend head coach. I don't want West Georgia's head coach. Just going to throw that out there now. I don't buy any of these kind of like former head coaches or big-time head coaches coming over. I'm not buying that. I do think it will be an offensive coordinator for the ACC, but for some reason, because of the way in which we hired Coach Hunter, I feel like the Southern Illinois coach is kind of in that mold. I think I looked at his record. He's had an outstanding record at Southern Illinois. The one thing about him is that I don't know how he's recruited in the South, and that's important. We both just touched on the importance of establishing a foothold here in the South. I think it's going to be a coach from kind of a conference that's either that we can increase their salary, or an offensive coordinator who's looking for a chance to prove that he wants to be a head coach. That's what I personally think.
No, and I can see that. I mean, this is an opportunity. I mean, this is the fun part. There's so many FBS head coaches out there, and it's you have an opportunity. You don't necessarily know when the next one's out there. We certainly on the side, a lot of people are in love with Chris Hatcher.
Yeah.
And his offensive prowess. Well, I can tell you, if you have a losing record and you can't stop anybody, that's a big knock on your team. I mean, they're in very dangerous territory, have a tough stretch. I know they play Jacksonville State this weekend on the road. They missed the playoffs. Your resume doesn't look so shiny.
Exactly.
A lot of these coordinators know that. Hey, look, I'm only one bad season away from being completely off the radar. So if there is an FBS program that is interested in me, I would rather take that opportunity and learn and have that opportunity out there to make a name for myself potentially. Also bring a staff along. I mean, that's the biggest part too. When Coach Hunter was hired on the basketball side, not many fans knew who he was because we just don't follow IUPUI basketball. It's the Summit League. At the same point, his first coaching hire and the guy who he basically made his associate head coach was Darryl LeBerry, who is a Tucker graduate, who has great in with certainly the Atlanta Metro AAU programs, who recruits Georgia, who played at Georgia Tech. This was his ace guy. So he said, look, I need you to set up camp and get me in front of these Atlanta guys. It's all about the connections. It's all about the relationships. I could agree with you. If you went and got a Dale Brown, I believe his name is, up there at Dale Lynn, I'm sorry, at Southern Illinois. Bring in a guy. Hey, look, somebody that has maybe been a recruiting coordinator at an SEC or an ACC school, who may be a running back or a wide receiver coach, something like that, where I'm bringing him in as my offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, depending on what position they coach, who they may not be a coordinator yet, but may be ready to take that next step.
Yes.
Somebody young and hungry to be able to say, hey, look, you've already recruited these guys for 2, 3, 4 years, this area. Come in here and be my guy locally and introduce me here and have that dynamic to it.
Absolutely, and that's a perfect pivot. Oh, by the way, I'm warning fans now. Whoever we get, if he is successful, do not be surprised if he moves on to a bigger school. It's not that they don't love GSU, but that's how this game works. Guys, sometimes if a big school comes a calling, that's what they do. That's how we're trying to do it. That's what people may do to us. Don't get upset, but you want a guy that's going to come in and establish credibility and a winning tradition. Let's move on finally to recruiting. Recruiting's kind of picked up a little bit over the last couple of weeks. We brought in River Bryant, Tevin Jones. I cannot pronounce his first name, but Smith. Remick Smith.
Remick Smith.
Okay. I watched a little bit on some of these guys, the first one being Tevin Jones. You tell me if I'm a little bit off here. I look at him, I've heard he's about 6'4", 250. I think he could probably be a very good pass rush defensive tackle. I don't know if he's on the edge rushing the pass because I don't see the speed. What do you see?
He does have that kind of hybrid mold, and I think he could be potentially, a left side defensive tackle or a strong side defensive end. He is very long. He has a very big frame. Definitely can put on a lot of weight. He does have decent speed and decent quickness. Has excellent footwork for somebody his size. A lot of times, too, especially at the high school level, you're going to have guys that are really big like that. Hey, throw them in here, just see if they can hold the point of attack. He's obviously been coached very well down there at Luella High School, which is on the south side of the city down in Henry County, with that program. And he's very, very disruptive. He's a guy that is in the backfield a lot, so he does have a very quick burst. He didn't really time well this summer, which I think took him off the radar a lot. I've seen numbers out there for his 40-yard dash in the high 4.9s. He plays a lot faster than that, and there's some guys who just don't time well, and that's what's interesting to me, certainly about the evaluating of high school talent. They get out to camps, they get out and see all these big name guys and these 3-star, 4-star, 5-star guys walking around them, and sometimes they don't run the fastest 40. They don't look the best, and they fall down the radar quite a bit. Had a conversation with guys at Rivals who were covering an opponent's game, one of Tevin's, and he said, look, he deserves those Big East offers. He deserves those other Sun Belt offers that he's got currently. He's that level player, which to me, it's a huge credit to the current coaching staff standpoint that they're able to reel these guys in. To your point, reel in 3 guys. We don't know who the head coach is. We don't know who the rest of the coaching staff is going to be there, if any of the staff currently is going to be there or not. A lot of times, like Tevin, he's committed to the school. He mentioned in the AJC article that he loves the physical therapy program at this school. Mm-hmm. This is why he wants to be it, and he wants his mom and dad to come see him play in the Dome. That's huge, and this can't be understated as well.
Let's talk a little bit about River Bryant. When I saw Tevin Jones, I just want last little thing. I agree. I saw him a lot in the backfield. Listen, there are a lot of defensive ends that run 4.40s that can't play football. It's not about your 40 time, especially when you're a defensive lineman. It's more about your time in the first 10 yards, because that's really what you're rushing. You're not rushing 40 yards to go get the quarterback. It's the first 10. It's that quick burst. I agree with you. He does seem to have that. River Bryant is listed as a tight end. I've seen him listed at other positions. Talk to me a little bit about River Bryant and what he brings to the table.
Sure. Plays out in Jackson County, which is just an outside of Athens, and a little bit smaller region, but moved to the defensive side of the ball just for more of anything than necessity. It's not playing on the offensive side of the ball because they just had the defensive line just obliterated. Had a conversation with the guys who cover Jackson County out there, and they actually like him a lot at defensive end, even on the FCS level potentially. And I've heard the word steal, which I like a lot. But he does have very good hands. Probably more of an H-back blocking tight end guy. He's not a burner by any means. It's not going to be a guy that's going to run, be able to run 30, 40, 50 yards down the field, get open. But I think he's one of those guys where, certainly looking at the matriculation from the tight end position, you have a boy who will be going. You'll have Alex Smith still there. Drew Pearson. Neither one has really been a standout tight end. Need a guy who can catch the football, and I think Rivers going to be that guy. Depending on how the next offense moves in, how they utilize a tight end or not. But he's a guy that's flexible, that has a good enough blocking ability, is physical enough, is big enough, has the frame to continue to grow and continue to mature. I think he's a guy long term that certainly can be a contributor on offense. May not be a dynamic player, may not be an explosive impact player at the tight end position, but is definitely a guy that you need in your program. Guy that does little things. He's a tremendous student from all the conversations that I've had and with the folks up there. And I mean, his SAT scores off the charts. I mean, he's been accepted into multiple local private schools and things in that way. So that's not a factor. So the more smart guys you can have, certainly around the offensive side of the ball, the better, in my opinion.
Nothing wrong with having flexibility with a player that can play either side of the football. And it shows he's a team guy. It shows he's willing to do what's needed to win. He clearly has been a tight end pretty much throughout his career. Coaching staff says we're decimated on defense. We need help. He stands up. That tells me he's a leader in the locker room too. Let's talk about Remix Smith. 6'3", 205 pounds. That's a grown man's safety's body. Will he be a DB at the next level, or will he come down in the box and be a linebacker? But I like the size. Tell me about him a little bit.
He's really got a chance to do whatever he wants to do. He does have the frame to probably put on 10 to 15 more pounds if he wanted to be potentially an outside linebacker in the system. I think it really just depends on too what the defensive side comes in, whatever the defensive coordinator is going to be, and what style they're going to play. He's recruited certainly as safety, and plays over there in Woodland in South Carolina on a very, very good team, and he is a heavy hitter. Is a big time dynamic player, playmaker, always around the football, and he's a guy too that will remind fans a lot of DeMazio Skelton, probably a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger at this point in his development. And we forget DeMazio went 2 years to a junior college, and this is now his senior year, and this is what level he's able to do from the safety position. When I get reports that he's bigger and stronger at the development stage than where Skelton is, I definitely think that's a positive. He could be a big safety, playing basically the strong side of things, or come in the box. Now you're seeing more flexible defensive packages where even Alabama runs the 4-2-5 in some cases, and they run off the 3-4. So just depending on what you can do, it's always good to have that ability. Hey, if you was formerly a linebacker or formerly a safety, you can drop into coverage if you choose to go that route. It's going to be very interesting to see where that goes long term.
Two things, then, I don't want to hold you up. I know it's a lot of Monday Night Football going on. O'Shea Carter is apparently putting up monstrous numbers right now. And I think that you did the recruiting review for this week, and he was like 13 of 19. Tell me if I'm wrong. 6 touchdowns.
Yes, and he basically didn't play the second half.
Tell me about this kid, because those are special type numbers. You just don't walk out of bed and throw 6 touchdowns in any level of a football game and only play basically a half. How good could this kid be?
He can be very good. O'Shea's a very big body kid. He's about 6'3", 6'4", about 230 pounds at this point. Maybe a little bit heavy, but he's a very big body kid. He has a tremendous arm. Plays in a very, very good region down there in Jacksonville, plays for Trinity Christian. His backfield mate is actually headed to the University of Florida, and is a running back commit, wide receiver athlete commit down there. But it's very interesting to see O'Shea develop, just because he was not necessarily off the radar, for recruiting circles, and I know Rivals and a couple other sites have listed him as 2-star. But he's a kid that took a visit and fell in love with the campus, fell in love with the vibe down here. Certainly there's 2 other Jacksonville commits from Raines High School, Calvin Holmes and Devontae Washington, who are both committed to the Panthers as well. So to have some guys that he's run in and set them on 7 circles in the summer and that he's familiar with, I think is very good. He's been very comfortable. He's been several times to fall practice as well, and I believe if I caught his Twitter post earlier today, he will actually be along with his Jacksonville running mates down there at the game this Saturday.
Okay.
At the Dome, so he'll be there at homecoming. It's a huge weekend for recruiting. Several of the schools have bye weeks, so would not be shocked at all to see several of the commits and certainly high-ranking prospects on the Dome floor prior to the game taking in homecoming.
Let's talk lastly just about some possible recruits that are coming in. I don't want to say anything I'm not supposed to say, but I know there's a lot of just looking at routes right now, a lot of people in the 3-star range that Georgia State is in front of. Where is, I don't know if you can say the player's name, but what are some positions you think, especially with homecoming this weekend, we may see a couple of more recruits coming in? Are we finally going to get to see some of these offensive and defensive linemen we so desperately want start to commit, or are we still looking at skill players, DBs, wide receivers, or the like?
I think it's a safe mixture. Just depending, and that's to get back to one point just for a second. I promise I'll answer that question. The one thing too, moving forward into the FBS ranks, I'm projecting out about 28 additional scholarships from the graduating seniors who exhaust their eligibility, moving forward to the huge ad moving up to the FBS rank. This is a huge number. So, you're going to need, an extra 4 to 5 offensive linemen, an extra 4 to 5 defensive linemen, more skill position players, better skill position players. When you're recruiting FBS talent, not the same as guys who are going to be recruiting by FCS level. You don't have to take so many chances to go after kids who are borderline, who may or may not have the grades to get in, or may or may not. Hey, look, this is a high risk, high reward type kid who may be a little bit smaller. He's going to be a 5'6", wide receiver or athlete, things like that. So I think you're really, really starting to see more of a niche carved out. You have your quarterback commit. You have 2 wide receivers in the fold. I look for a running back. As we know, certainly from watching football, running backs are running backs. They can pretty much traverse through any system. You know, whether it's going to be spread, whether it's going to be you need a guy who can run the rock with some authority. Speed is great, power is great. If you have both, even better. I think looking forward to what running backs are around. I definitely think the linemen. I think Tevin was a huge step forward. I definitely look for another defensive tackle, nose guard type caliber recruit. Maybe even several of those come in. I look certainly at linebacker. You want to have some depth there. Guys coming in, whether you're running a 4-3, 4-2-5, you're going to need some bodies. I think it's going to be a healthy blend. I know certainly as the high school seasons wind down, some of these guys either finish their seasons out in the playoffs or finish their season out in the regular season. You're getting toward the back half of the schedule, so the more home games, and I know some of the Old Dominion game in several weeks will also encompass a ton of recruits as well, just because that will be one of the final weeks of high school football. So, especially around the state of Georgia, so it's a very good thing. I'm not trying to dodge the question there, specific names,
no,
but I don't have anybody specifically targeted for this weekend. But it's always good to hear that several verbal commits will be in the building, and hopefully being salesmen as well. That's part. I know O'Shea's been very public down there in Florida, talking to some folks that cover the team. He's telling everybody, hey, look, I'm going to Georgia State, and anybody interested in going up there with me, come on. And I think that's very powerful. It tells me a lot about him as a person and basically willing to recruit. Certainly the last few days, seeing Rebecca and seeing Tevin and River, verbally commit, they're excited to be joining them as well. It's interesting to see them interact. Certainly on the social networking venues, they're excited. They want to know about it. They're following each other's progress, rooting for each other. And I think that's a critical thing. Moving forward is being able to get that level of commitment and know, hey, look, we don't know necessarily right now who the head coach is going to be. We don't know what style we're going to play. We know who we're going to be playing, and we know who we're going to be playing with for the most part. This roster is not going to turn over a ton. You do lose big name players in Don Russell, but by my count, you basically lose 5 scholarship players on offense and basically 3 on defense. So you're only talking about a handful of guys who will be off this roster when the season ends November 10th.
Let me ask you one last quick question, and just looking over some of the recruits I'm looking at right now. Something just popped in my head. If there was, what part of the football team do you think we must get an impact player in recruiting? I know we've got O'Shea, and he's apparently outstanding. I know we're losing Russell in the backfield. Is it offensive, defensive line? Is it getting a replacement for Russell? What's the one area we must get an impact player in this recruiting class?
I think it's running back. I think there's no question. Facing an SEC caliber, guy that played in the SEC for several years is very difficult, and we certainly don't have that luxury anymore. Moving to the FBS ranks, where we can have a guy drop down from an SEC, ACC, Big 10, Big 12 school, wherever it is, to come and be immediately eligible. I think the defensive side of the ball will be boosted by Nerman Delic being eligible next season. So that's one defensive tackle potentially that can slide some other guys down the line. Still need some impact players on the defensive line. Linemen are tough because, number one, they're very difficult to evaluate unless you're just dominant. Obviously, it wasn't hard to see how good Jadeveon Clowney was going to be in high school.
Right.
But going to find guys, going and finding a Joe Lockley from Portal High School, going to find the guys who you can plug in immediately. That's an important factor. But I think it starts with the running back. A good running game can make even the most average quarterback look really, really good, and make everybody certainly offensive coordinators look really smart by handing the ball. It was amazing, certainly to see how smart John Bond looked with some of the fans. Say, hey, can you give the ball to number 20, let him go, and he'll make you look real smart. And congratulations to him as well for picking up offensive player of the week at the
absolutely. Well, I'm gonna let you get out of here, Ben. We'll be in touch soon over the next week or so, especially after homecoming. But definitely want to try and get you back on after maybe around mid-November. Hopefully we've got some news on the coaching search. But Ben, once again, it's great having you on the podcast. We look forward to talking to you soon.
You got it, man. Anytime. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Ben. That was Ben Moore from PantherTalk.com. This is Eric from Missed on Points. You all have a good day. See you soon.